So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your Nord VPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scoreboard. Let's start with the fact that a bit of a throwback to begin this day. Ashwin and Anderson were like two old guys arguing over their favourite seat on the bus to begin the day. But I thought England actually cleaned up pretty well on what would be a decent enough wicket. But it was Jaiswal from that first innings that we really care about, with his double 100, of course. There's something kind of cool about Indian cricket at the moment, which I've never quite written the piece about, but it's quite interesting that India can be the incredible superpower of cricket and the most active political force that we've ever had within the game, the most powerful, the most money, and all these sorts of things. And then you have all these stories of people like Mohammad Siraj and Washington Sundar, and now Jaiswal coming from nothing. But anyway, eventually Jaiswal was out to Anderson, who was caught when he was playing that big tail end slog at the end. And then, of course, England continued that method when they went with Bazball mode. And to be fair, I thought the Indian players seemed to handle it pretty well this time compared to the last test. Maybe better than some of the fans, is that fair to say? But unfortunately for England, Crawley might be, I don't know, the worst user of his feet to spin I've ever seen. I don't have the exact stats, but my memory is that almost every second time he comes down the wicket to a spinner, he seems to go out to them at the moment. And that obviously opened up an end just when the ball was starting to reverse swing, and then it was all about Bumrah. He got root again. He did what he threatened to do to Pope in the last game. He may actually, Bumrah might need to send a ham to the Stumps' family because unfortunately he sent some stumps to Stumps heaven. Took Bairstow, and then he made Ben Stokes bring out the disappointed bat drop there as well. May I say, or dare I say, England have been bumballed? It'd be bumballed, wouldn't it? Doesn't quite work as well, but it's so close. It's so close. Anyway, on with the show. You're going to be shocked to know we're going to be talking about Jasprit Bumrah even more on the rest of the show. And remember, if you want to ask any questions or anything else, feel free. Super Chat, always the best way to go when it comes to these sorts of things. But we'll get through the main part of the scoreboard, and then we'll come to the chats afterwards as well. But I'm thinking there's going to be quite a few of them out there. But let's get to the scoreboard. And let's start with the man himself. So this is Bumrah to root, and we can just see here, his the ability to move batters around is something I've talked about quite a lot. That I think fast bowlers have, I don't want to say they've always had, but certainly, maybe in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was more something that where pace was a little bit more important, banging the ball into the wicket, those sorts of things. But certainly, Curtly Ambrose, Glenn McGrath. And then you start to get the guys like Philander and Muhammad Asif and Stuart Clark and obviously Jimmy Anderson. But the ability to move a batter around a crease intentionally because of deadly accuracy and then pick them up is obviously a spinner's skill originally. So to be able to do it at the pace at which that Bumrah does is just, I don't know what you're supposed to do to that. I talked about him last test being a combination of Mark Wood and Jimmy Anderson all in one. This is the stuff I'm talking about. This, if you have a look at the balls here, setting him up, moving him into the position that he wants here, and then getting him to play at a ball that was actually, these balls are quite wide, right? For Indian wickets, that is a quite a wide ball that you could probably stay leg stump off, and you could see his leg stump. That's how far he's dragged him across the crease here. You could stay leg stump of that and slash it away, or you could, knock it through the line. But mostly, that's just a ball, if Root wanted to, he could leave. But he's not in his normal position at this stage, and that is the absolute genius of Bumrah. But what about just Bumrah to Joe Root? This is in Test match cricket so far. So when Bumrah bowls to Root in England, He's got an average of 40 against him, right? So he's not exactly dominating Joe Root at all in that particular situation. And then when he gets to India, it's 15. And we did actually put in all limited overs stats into this as well, because it is really, really fascinating. And when you put it into limited overs, I think this comes down to 33, but this is still somewhere around 16, 17. So it's 6 dismissals in international cricket in India and 6 in England. And he's just so much better. And I don't know how much of this is things like he bowls very differently in India. I thought there was a little bit of reverse, obviously, when he got Root out today. So whether it's the ball reverses, or he's more comfortable reversing it in India than he is in England. I don't know if it's a different lengths or what it may be, but it's really interesting that he's just so much better against Root at home than he is away. This is Jasprit Bumrah average against the Fab Four batters in Test cricket. He averages an incredible 0 against Virat Kohli. Probably put that one up on the title for later. But you can see here, averaging 32 against Joe Root in Test cricket. Steve Smith, 52. Still under Steve Smith's overall mark, but I think Smith would take that. And Williamson down here at 26. You know, I think you would take this as a whole. That's a pretty good record for any player to have against, you know, what have been the defining batters of this generation. You take these numbers. And this is Bumrah versus Pope. So you can see here the ball is coming from, I'm trying to get the angle right for you. It's probably coming from about here. So it's coming in and just tailing in. And you can see that it just drifts in around here and misses middle stump and hits leg stump. Just an absolutely phenomenal delivery. And we saw in the last match, you know, especially when Pope was struggling, most of his struggles came against Bumrah when he was attacking the stumps. I think there might have been one in Hyderabad where he just managed to dig it out. I did ask CricFizz to have a look. They couldn't see any stats that suggested that Bumrah bowls to Yorker more to Pope than anyone else. But, you know, there was I think it was a Crickmetric tweet today just showing all of Bumrah's incredible Yorkers. Certainly a brilliant delivery that he has. And this is the setup to Bairstow. So Bairstow, I think it's worth mentioning here that he is worried about the ball full and straight. There was a Yorker early on that was probably more, almost a half volley. I think Bumrah got it slightly wrong, but it was just drifting down leg stump. And Bairstow, I think, was really, really worried about the ball, you know, being outside leg stump. Oh, wait, is this Bairstow? Oh, I might have got that one confused. But he was really worried about the LBW and being set up for that and everything else. And so, you know, again, you had a situation where someone was just, what's this one? Oh, now I'm confused. Anyway, sorry. I'll work that out on later. But for Bairstow, I thought what he was trying to do is he was trying to play on the LBW side of things with Bairstow, and you know, worked him over beautifully as well. This is the fastest Asian pacers to 150 wickets. It's worth noting that Waqar Younis was just on a different level, and it's actually a real shame that he couldn't maintain what he did later on in his career. I don't think he gets the respect that he should for what he did at the absolute start of his career, and sadly, he just wasn't that kind of bowler afterwards. He's kind of lost his athleticism, I suppose, that kind of incredible rotation that he had, you know, in his waist, and he was never that kind of bowler again. But you can see here, this is obviously, you know, the gold standard, but these two guys were absolutely brilliant. You're talking about two young, fast strike bowlers who, you know, were incredible. I mean, Shoaib Akhtar is still, again, another bowler who started really, really well, and Bumrah is ahead of him. One thing I would say is that Bumrah has probably played in more test matches where the wickets were flowing a little bit more free. I mean, if you think of some of the wickets these two poor dudes had to play on, although so did he. But he had the advantage of early reverse swing and perfecting it at his pace. But so there's probably an element of that in there. But even so, I think this is the special list. This is the, you know, the strike bowling Asian bowlers, and I think it's absolutely fantastic from that point of view. This is the best seam bowling averages, minimum 150 wickets. So this shows something quite special. This takes it to a whole nother level. So you can see here that Cummins is at a lowly 22.4, Rabada at a lowly 22.05, and and then Bumrah is 20.28. So Barnes is the only other bowler that is close to this if Bumrah goes past the 200 wicket point at the same average, which would be phenomenal. I think at that point, Barnes and Davidson both come off the list. And then you've got Malcolm Marshall and Joel Garner, and you can see that Bumrah is south of both of those. Now, he's doing that from India. He hasn't, obviously, he's probably early on in his career, he had a remarkable run of not playing at home, but he has had to do some of that in India. A lot of this is in the wobble ball era, so I think, all three of these guys certainly get a boost from that. I think that's fair to say. It's been a tough era for anyone to bowl in. Anyone to bat in. It's starting to ease off a little bit now, but certainly that's the case. But even so, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And there's so many different parts to his bowling. I'll put it this way. If you take Barnes away for a minute, because he's a very different kind of bowler, if you look at Malcolm Marshall, so Malcolm Marshall had the ability to swing the ball. He was very, very skillful with what he did. Very, very accurate and very, very fast, but obviously very short. If you've got... that was Marshall. If you've got Joel Garner, you've obviously got someone who can seam the ball at pace, but also very, very tall, but clearly couldn't swing the ball. You would put Ambrose in that same area, right? And if you come down to McGrath, again, couldn't really swing the ball, right? Davidson, left arm pace before, 40, 50 years? No, 35 years before Wasm Akram existed. Absolutely dominated because there'd never been a left armer of his level before, with his ability, with his skill ability, and his pace ability and his accuracy. Those three combined was absolutely incredible. But all these bowlers have kind of, their main way of doing it. Marshall is probably the closest to the all-round package, right? Bumrah has pace. He's not massively tall, but he has a very high release. He's incredibly accurate. We know he can swing the ball. We know he can seam the ball. That's pretty close to the most all-round bowler that we have seen. The fact, if you want to throw in the other thing, which isn't applicable to all these other bowlers, of course, it's the ability to bowl in Asia and not in Asia, right? And it really is his ability to do both of those things is just remarkable, right? And this is his test average at the start of his career, and this is during peak wobble ball, and he's averaging, again, a lowly 21.99. What's interesting is just of recent times that's just gone, subterranean. Now, there's been a couple of friendly wickets at times, but today wasn't one of those friendly wickets, and Hyderabad wasn't a friendly wicket. They both gave him assistance and helped him as a bowler at times, but a lot of it is just him being smarter and more talented than everyone else, right? Let's be honest. Mark Wood looked okay at Hyderabad, but he didn't look like this. Jimmy Anderson looked like he could regularly chip in with wickets. Don't know if Jimmy Anderson looked like he was about to start a collapse. And that's the difference, right? Bumrah is on that level at the moment. And it's just, been absolutely... I don't really know what to say, because it is so much beyond what we have seen. And the only reason that you can't quite put him in that Cummins and Rabada status at the moment is just because they've done it a lot more. But what he has done in his brief amount of test matches is absolutely just, explodes the top of your head. Addy sent me this tweet today, which I thought was quite cool. Bumrah has bowled 20% of the overs, taken 50% of the wickets, and conceded 15% of the runs. That was halfway through the day. I think he took more. He might have taken more wickets after that as well. But just, again, what do you do? And Kuldeep, I thought, bowled okay. Akshar bowled okay. Ashwin obviously has got stuck on 496, happens to the best of us. But, and Mukesh obviously got taken to the cleaners early on. What is this game without Bumrah? It'd be really, really interesting. Perhaps the spinners would have still kept the pressure on, but we never had to worry about that. What a day of bowling by Jasprit Bumrah on what would you say that was a wicket for seamers? I'm trying to think, because Anderson got a bit of seam movement as well. It's like a 6 out of 10 for seamers. Like there's something in it. For Asia, it'd be quite high up, but overall, it's probably like a 6 out of 10. There's a little bit of bounce, a little bit of carry. We saw the one to Stokes keep a little bit low, probably not quite as low as Stokes might have made it look afterwards. But realistically, to blitz through a team like that, especially after the start they got, that Zach Crawley wicket really has probably come back to haunt England quite a bit. Anyway, that's all we have for Jasprit Bumrah. I'll probably have to do a video on him again. I feel like I've done a lot of videos on him, but then again, I feel like I should. I really wanted to talk about, actually, before we just get to Ben Foakes' smiley face. Ben Foakes was bowled today by a fairly standard delivery from Kuldeep Yadav that kind of, it's almost like he got confused against it. I'm not sure if he just nicked his pad on the way through with his bat, but his hands were sort of feeling out in front of him for the ball a little bit. And obviously got bowled sort of around his bat, which is a random way of getting bowled, I would say. It's certainly not the more obvious way, which would generally, if a ball slid across you, obviously you're going to miss it on the outside of your bat, but not generally when the ball's spinning back in. But you can't blame any batter if they struggle against left arm spin, especially when it's good, because you don't face a lot of left arm spin, right? And when I asked CricViz, they couldn't find a single ball that Ben Foakes had faced of left arm wrist spin in first class cricket. However, this is how much bowling has been done by left arm wrist spin in the last 3 years of Test cricket, and this is Foakes in his career. So not quite the last 3 years, but when did he start? 2018. So about 5 or 6 years for him now. You can see that Foakes, weirdly enough, has faced quite a lot of left arm wrist spin. He's up at almost 3%. So you could make the argument here that he's faced about 10 times more than what some other, the standard is. But this is what it actually means. His 3% is still here. It's still a tiny little slither of the balls that he's faced in professional cricket. In Test cricket, I should say, in his case. But you can see here just what everyone else has faced. I wasn't even sure if I got the colours right here, just because it was so hard to make this graphic make any sense. But anyway. But Pope and Crawley were facing Kuldeep at one stage as well. And we were looking up those records with CricViz. So this is a combination of my database and CricViz having a look as well. But Pope had faced Kuldeep before for 20 balls, or at least 15 of those were Kuldeep, I think. But I think that's right. I think it was either 15 or 20. I'm not sure if he'd faced 5 more from anyone else. But that was all the balls that he had faced in first-class cricket from left-arm wrist spin. And this is Pope in T20 cricket, 5 balls from Darcy Short. And this is Crawley in all levels of professional cricket. The one that is very hard to find ball-by-ball data is List A cricket. So I don't have a database for that. That was a bit beyond me. But you can see here that Crawley faced, I think, it says innings. That should be balls. Sorry, just realised I've got that wrong. But it was 9 balls from Hinchcliffe. And I don't even know if Hinchcliffe is still playing. He certainly was playing. He was in the Big Bash for a while. Let me just turn the lights back on in my office. Well, not in my office, TalkSport's office. And he faced 6 balls from Dooley, another Australian wrist spinner. And so if you look at this, you've got an Indian and 3 Australians that these guys had faced. In English cricket, left-arm wrist spin basically doesn't exist until Jake Lintott came around. It just wasn't a thing that you saw. Michael Rippon bowled a couple of balls, I think, in county cricket at one stage, but he never really got to go. In fact, Michael Rippon's played cricket everywhere. I've got to get him on the podcast one day because he's played in the Netherlands, South Africa, New Zealand, and England. And that's domestic cricket before you get to his international cricket as well. But yeah, fascinating career. But that's for another day. But the point is that there really aren't many of these guys out there at all. And so it is very, very hard. And I think it's more hard generally for England players just because they don't seem to exist. I had a look a few years ago at English cricket and the amount of balls that have been bowled in county cricket by left-arm wrist spin. And I think that Simon Kadich and Brad Hogg were the 2 leaders. You've got a batter who bowls a little bit and a bowler who didn't really play county cricket much at all. But this is the entire list of left-arm wrist spin bowlers in the history of cricket who've got a wicket. In fact, it's even one without a wicket because Daniel Flynn's on here for some reason, but I don't know why he's here. So today, Kuldeep Yadav went to equal third in the most wickets ever taken by left-arm wrist spin. What? 37 wickets. He joined Lakshan Sandakan from Sri Lanka. And it's just worth having a bit of a look at this list. So Paul Adams, obviously, the frog in the blender action, kind of ends up being a left-arm finger spinner in that he bowls around the wicket like a left-arm finger spinner by the end of his career. But certainly a wrist spinner in the way that the ball came out of his hand. Had a very good start to his career, and then South Africa kind of lost energy with him. Sadly retired just before T20 cricket got big, and I interviewed him about that once, and he was like, yeah, I probably made a mistake there. Number 2 on the list is the great Chuck Fleetwood Smith, who, to be fair, would have taken a lot more wickets had World War II not come at the time they did. Obviously, he's famous for having the most runs ever taken off him in an innings, where he basically had a dirty protest mid-innings, and of course, got drunk in the army and crashed a Jeep and left it somewhere. Actually, I don't think it was a Jeep. I think it was like another military vehicle, but I don't know the names of all the military vehicles, so you have to go with that. Fantastically interesting cricketer, Chuck Fleetwood Smith, and would have taken more wickets. Then you got Sandakan, of course, who basically doesn't play all that much at all. And occasionally comes in for Sri Lanka. So Kuldeep's probably going to, even if he just plays a couple more tests, he's probably going to end up as the second most wickets ever by left-arm wrist spin. You'd see, I don't know much about Inshan Ali. I have to have a look at him. You got Michael Bevan, at best a part-timer. Dennis Compton, again, didn't bowl that much. Simon Kadich, another part-timer. Hogg started as a medium pacer batter and ended up as a left-arm wrist spinner. Then you got the West Indian Dave Muhammad down here. This is obviously Zahir Khan. And then you've got Shamsi. So you've got, in Zahir Khan and Waqar Salim Keel, you've got 2 guys who I suppose have a chance of getting a few more wickets. The point being, guys, is you can't really blame anyone if they're not particularly good at this, especially in red ball cricket. It's just not a thing that you have to come up against. It's, I'd love to say that this is about the death of left-arm wrist spin, but the truth is that we just never had left-arm wrist spin to begin with. Such a stupidly weird art form that it is. Just wanted to, can we get a little commotion for this pitch? This is the second great test match wicket. Ball's coming on nicely for the bat, so you could score quite easily. This one's got nice pace and carry, a little bit of seam movement, of course. Quicks are certainly in the game. Mukesh Kumar still got taken to the cleaners, and who knows what a second England seamer would have done. But Anderson and Bumrah are certainly doing pretty well on this wicket so far. But also, there's still something in it for the spinners, and there's some good bowling at times from the spinners as well. Has got some wickets. I like the bounce off it. I like the bounce for seam and for spin. Just a really good wicket, all things considered. And, I think we spend a lot of time sort of moaning about wickets and everything else. And we do, we've had some really flat pitches in Pakistan over the last little while. Australia had their issue with pitches for a while. South Africa and India have really made their wickets really bowler friendly. And there's many different reasons that the teams have done all these different things at times. And sometimes it's just the wickets haven't gone particularly well. But 2 great wickets in a row. And for all the moaning, it's always worth flagging up these 2 groundsmen. And also, not particularly easy, I would assume, in a ground like Visakhapatnam, where you just don't get a lot of cricket, right? So to have a wicket of this quality, I thought it was just exceptional, stuff and proper cricket wickets, really. Something for everyone. Yesterday, I talked about Silly Point, and I said how I was keeping an eye on whether there were going to be more dismissals at Silly Point now that players seem to be getting their bats so far ahead of their pads to ensure that they don't go out LBW. We almost had a couple of dismissals yesterday from this, and then today we had another one. This one, I would say, is slightly more like a traditional Silly Point dismissal in that you can just see this is Duckett, and it's hit the top corner of the bat, so it looped up. So what I was talking about was more the balls that come off the face of the bat, but it's the same thing. Bat's absolutely nowhere near the pad here. He's not thrusting it together. The bat, I would assume, I didn't see the side on, but I would assume the bat is a long way ahead. And when you keep doing that, there is a chance that, you will spoon the ball up on the offside a little bit. So worth watching. Both teams have got wickets doing that now in this series. And England were unlucky not to get probably another one as well. So just worth keeping an eye on. And then, this is quite funny. I mean, I only bring this up because, so quite clearly, England were desperate to get out on the ground and bowl in the dark. And, obviously, India, not so much, right? We all get that. We all understand the thinking behind both of these teams. England's like, yeah, it's getting gloomy. We're bowling at the end of the day. We'd really like to bowl at the moment. And Rohit Sharma's like, I don't want to go. So there was actually, I think I got this right, and we were trying to time it, and I'm not sure we ever got it exactly, but I believe there was a 12.5 minute gap between the players walking off the field and the first ball being bowled in the next innings. And that was largely down to Rohit Sharma. I think he might have been the last guy to come out of the change rooms and then was in no hurry. I think when Jaiswal was about to face his first ball, Rohit Sharma also came down to have another chat to delay it even further. And on a day when Angelo Matthews has been dismissed by hitting his own stumps while hitting a boundary, and if you can't find it, I tweeted about it, but just look up Angelo Matthews. It may be a funnier dismissal than the timed out, just because of how bad the ball from KS Ahmed is. It's worth watching. But the point being that this Rohit Sharma moment was quite funny because I was talking about Angelo Matthews probably around the time he was dismissed in the other game, because they were getting close to that 2-minute warning period. And I don't, and Murray Erasmus was the umpire out there again. Just some great throwbacks to that time. And just last one, just a little bit of
stumps of day one of this game in Johannesburg. South Africa were 200. Stumps of day one of this game in Johannesburg.
Let me stop that and just start here. There was an announcement today that there was a new trophy. In fact, I've got the order of these wrong, so I'll just...
Stumps of day one.
This is a brand new trophy. A lot of people are saying it reminds them of a certain anatomy on some people. You have to work that one out on your own. But it's a really important trophy for me in the history of cricket. This is the Tangawai trophy, and this is going to be played for between New Zealand and South Africa. But the reason that trophy has that name is, actually, I'll just show you this video.
Stumps of day one of this game in Johannesburg. South Africa were 259 for 8. The next day was Christmas, so they had a rest. Back in New Zealand, and completely unrelated to the cricket, a train driver was not aware of a mudslide ahead of him, and at the last moment the emergency brake was used. A local foreman also tried sandbags to slow it down, but the train went into the river. They call it the Tangawai disaster, and it's still the worst rail accident in the history of New Zealand. 151 people died. Among them was a woman named Narissa Love, who just happened to be the fiancée of Bob Blair, who was playing for New Zealand in that test. Blair was only 21 years old, and when he heard the news of his fiancée, he never left the hotel to head down to the ground for Boxing Day.
So I just want to follow this up. So that's what happens. The test is played over the Christmas period. So poor Bob Blair finds out on Christmas Day that his fiancée has passed away, and then obviously on Boxing Day when the test is supposed to resume, Bob Blair stays back at the hotel and the rest of the team go down to the ground. But there's more to the story. We've done some videos on this before. Obviously, that's a part of one of the videos. That's I'm sure that Muku will drop the link to that. You can also hear there's a double century episode about this as well. And the next part of the story is about the fact that, I won't go through every single detail, but New Zealand have a horrible time on Boxing Day batting on this wicket. And many players go to hospital. They don't just get hurt, they go to hospital. At 9 wickets down, Bert Sutcliffe, the New Zealand batter, starts to leave the field, and because they think that Bob Blair's not there, and Bob Blair's made his own way down to the ground, pads up, and he goes out to bat. And he goes out to bat because I don't even know really, but I think he just thought it was the right thing to do and help his team. And it wasn't like they were in a position to win the game. In fact, I think they'd only just gone past the follow-on at that point, or maybe it was going past the follow-on when Bob Blair was out there. I can't remember the full details. They still ended up losing the game, but that story has, the people that were in South Africa at that time still talk about that story and what it meant for them. So great, I think just great work between South Africa and New Zealand to come up with that trophy. It is one of the more incredible stories in Test cricket. I haven't done it justice here, but I just wanted to mention it, and it is worth going and having a look at the podcast or the video. I think Muku might put the link in to the time code later if you want to go have a look at that. But well done to everyone involved for don't want to say honoring the people who died in the disaster, but remembering the people who died in the disaster and the part that cricket played in, in helping New Zealand deal with something that was quite a big thing for them at that time. All right, that is me for the scoreboard part of the show. I am going to go through the chat and see what you guys are asking me. If you are desperate to ask a question, same as always, super chat them. If not, just, ride your luck. See how you go, right? See how you feel. But thank you to everyone for commenting. So please keep commenting, keep all that stuff coming. Throw me a like while we play a quick ad. And then after this ad, we'll come back with questions from you, the people, the humans, the questioners. Jared Kimber, Scoreboard, ad.
Ever wondered why slower deliveries work, what a zombie ball is, or how Sunil Gavaskar would have batted in T20? Well, we have the channel for you, Good Areas. Twice a week, we have a new deep dive into a great story from cricket on our main channel, Good Areas. It is the history and present of cricket as narrated by me. If you make any content, Memento is the tool for you. Take your long format pods and meetings and anything you have and let Memento cut and slice it up for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try memento.fm today.
Okay, that was supposed to be another ad. So just give me one moment while I go.
A lot of thanks to the kind folks at FlexiSpot for looking after my office and my butt by sending me their E7 Pro desk that save your favorite desk heights at a touch of a button. You don't have to crank anything. This thing just finds the height that you like and you can work. And their BS12 Pro chair that supports my posterior while I'm recording, this ad and all my shows. If you need great desks, especially ones that change heights or the best quality chairs, head on over to FlexiSpot today.
All right, welcome back. I think I've got a few questions, but keep them coming in. As I said, throw a like and everything else. And let's see how we go with that. What's wrong with the volume? Only two. All right, Muku, look into the volume because people are complaining about that. But I can't really do much while I'm live on air, everyone, just so that you're aware. It is what it is. But it's... Oh, someone's complaining about the podcast volume on podcasts. I can't help you about that, mate. We're on a live show. All right, Gautam. Muku can... okay, you've got the one from Gautam. Fine. Soham says, posted this question earlier. I forgot the super chat. Wow, super chat's important. If nothing else, because when there's lots of comments, it's the only way for me to find these things. Posted the question earlier. Oh, okay. I don't know what that question is. You might need to find that one from Soham in there. Shubham says, God save us when Bumrah and Shami retire. Yeah, I think there's a few teams, though, isn't there, that are probably feeling the same outside of South Africa? Because New Zealand, Australia, England, India are all in very similar situations with their fast bowlers, right? I think that's right. And South Africa's the one where they've got some younger guys and everyone they seem to bring in takes a 7 anyway, and they seem to have a bit more of a conveyor belt going. I think Australia have some good talent, but there's going to be a drop-off behind Cummins, Hazelwood, and Stark, probably in the short term. So I think there's a few teams out there like that. Where would the first test have been if Shami had been the second team, not Siraj? And I say that as a Siraj fan, but Shami, is just a different level at the moment. Having Siraj, who's still youngish, or certainly he's not over bowled like some people his age would be. I think he's a huge advantage going ahead. Prashid Krishna is certainly a talent. I don't know about Arshdeep. I think everyone knows I'm kind of mildly obsessed with him. I don't know how I feel about him as a potential test bowler, but the drop off from Shami and look at someone like Shami, in fact, who was, I don't want to say struggled for a long time, but certainly wasn't this bowler for a very long time. Things have, definitely changed quite a bit there. I think I think it's a fair comment, and thank you for your super chat, Shubham, sorry. Chandrasekhar says, why has Ashwin been so ineffective today? When was the last time he's gone wickless in test innings in India? Well, I mean, part of that was Bumrah bowling. They also had the extra spinner. So, I do think that was a part of it. I think he hasn't quite adjusted to the way England is playing. Having said that, I still expect him to take a lot of wickets in the second innings. I believe the way England are playing against him might work at times on the slightly flatter wickets, which I suppose it does to everyone. But do you know what I mean? I think it would work against him on the slightly flatter wickets, as we've seen in white ball cricket sometimes against him. I don't know how you play that way further on. And if bounce keeps playing a part in this, I just think Ashwin's going to be, going to do well. I didn't think he bowled terribly today, but I've felt that he just hasn't He hasn't looked like the apex predator that I suppose we are used to seeing. So I think that's very fair, and I can understand why people would be confused by that and everything else. But I wouldn't be surprised if he takes his 500th wicket in the fourth innings. Fourth innings? Yeah, fourth inning of this Test match. So I wouldn't throw him away. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I do think the way that they are attacking has just put him off what he does best, right? The one thing I was surprised about this innings was that there was some bounce out there, and I thought he might be, more of a threat with the bounce. But the fact that he wasn't was not ideal. Gautam, who has sent a super chat, says, why was Siraj not given more overs in the first test? Why pick Mukesh instead? Why not select Sundar as a low-use fifth bowler who can bat? Lastly, why not take a gamble on Sarfaraz? That's a lot of questions, Gautam. Why was Siraj not given more overs in the first test? Probably every time they threw the ball to Bumrah. I think the thing with having two spinners on a wicket like that in Hyderabad is, two quicks, I should say, on a wicket like that in Hyderabad, is that you're probably only going to need your spinner for a few key spells. I keep saying spinner. You're probably only going to need your seamer for a few key spells. And if you've got Bumrah in the attack, you're generally going to give the ball to Bumrah in that situation. So that's probably the reason. Why pick Mukesh instead? I think they said that they wanted to give Siraj a rest. They were talking about the amount of cricket that he had played. I think that's more than fine to have a go at that. I think they want to see more of Mukesh as well. Why not select Washington? I'm not involved in the camp, and I think everyone knows I'm like one of the biggest fans of him as a cricketer there is. But does he give you enough with the bat that it's worth having him in the side and not bowling? I just think his biggest problem is that it's not that he's not great enough with the bat or the ball at the moment. It's just that he's too similar to Ashwin. And I think when we've seen him and Ashwin play at the same time, they're both tall finger spinners. Off spinners, I should say. If you look at the difference between Jadeja and Akshar, it's actually quite big. And there's still an issue with having both of them in the same side, right? So I'm not sure I would go with that. And then what about Sarfaraz? Well, I think that's just as simple as the fact that they like to have that extra bowling option. And when you have that extra bowling option, it usually means that your fourth and fifth bowlers don't get as much of a go because they're fighting for the fourth bowler's overs, right? Whereas your main three bowlers are always going to get a bit of a go. SD Roy says, folks got done by the drift. It drifted a little bit more away from him. Yeah, that would make sense, except for the fact that have a look at what his bat does. It goes away from it. So I think the drift played a part. I don't think that's why his bat goes a bit weird. Either he realized at a certain point he was playing the wrong line, which could be because of the drift, or he flicks his pad on the way through. I don't even know what the third option is. He just wasn't fully committed to what he wanted to play. But have a look at the bat. That's not the drift. The drift, if that was the case with the drift, his bat would have actually gone outside the line, right? So generally, if you look at the most famous drift ball, of course, is Mike Gatting and Shane Warne, where Gatting's bat goes with the drift, and so when the ball spins back, it goes the other way. So with a left arm wrist spinner, if the drift gets you, usually what would happen is your bat will actually go outside the line, and then the ball will spin back through the gap. That's kind of the opposite of what happens here. Now, that doesn't mean that the drift didn't play a part. It doesn't mean that he didn't flick his pad. It doesn't mean that he just didn't play a weak shot. But was an incredibly weird way to be dismissed. It's not something that we would see very much in cricket. Oh, partly because we don't see left-arm spinners, but that's a different conversation. Rahul says, how good would Kuldeep be on some Australian pitches like Adelaide or Sydney? I think he has the ability to make an impact. I don't think there's a wicket in the world he can't bowl on. Now he's got that extra pace. I thought at times today he wasn't as accurate as I would want him to be. I feel like I've seen him bowl more accurate recently. Not in test matches, obviously, but I wouldn't have minded to see him a little bit more accurate. In Australia, pitches can be quite flat, so you do want to be quite accurate with your bowling in order, that sort of Shane Warne versus McGill type of bowler, it just pays to be a little bit more accurate in Australia from that point of view. But he gets overspin, he gets side spin, he's got, deliveries that are hard to pick. I think Kuldeep can bowl everywhere. I think I've said before that he's very high up my board of best spinners in the world. He might be in the best, 5 spinners in the world in Test cricket, and yet can't get into this side. Just tells you how ridiculously talented the Indian side is at the moment. But if he's not top 5, he's certainly top 10 without any question. I think we had him quite high in our. I had him quite high. I think it was me, or maybe it was Bayram who picked him in the draft over on Cricket Picks as well. He's a fantastic cricketer. Shomik says, "Hey Jared, what do you think about the idea of playing an extra batter instead of Mukesh fifth bowler going forward?" I don't have a problem with it, but there's clearly an issue with why they're not doing it. I think they like the 5 bowler lineup a little bit more. I think if Jadeja's fit, then I have absolutely no issue with going with 5 bowlers every time. If Jadeja's not fit, I probably myself would look at that and go, do you need Mukesh? And to be fair, if India had bowled first and he got the same conditions that Anderson bowled with, maybe he does get a couple of early wickets, and we're just looking at that very differently, right? But that's the way I would look at it is without Jadeja, it's more maybe a 50-50 call. With Jadeja on the side, I'm just like, let's just play 5 bowlers because we can, and it's awesome. Talking about bowlers, Sandeep says, why not play England's 2 fast bowlers? Why not England play 2 fast bowlers? They like what Rehan Ahmed brings to the side when it comes to the batting and the bowling. So I think that is a factor. They also like the fact that Rehan Ahmed, with the revolutions on the ball and the dip and the extra bounce, just gives them something different. I don't think they want to be in a situation where Rehan Ahmed is going to bowl like 25 or 30 overs in a day. He's not at that level at the moment. Although I thought he bowled well at times in the first innings early on. But he's not at that level, and they know that. But it gives them just that little bit of extra flexibility, something different. Also gives them something to bowl to the tail, which has not been a strength of theirs. Then you're talking about if they bring in the 2 seamers and then they get to a position a bit like India where you don't really need 2 seamers, who's going to have to bowl more overs? It's going to be Joe Root. So we already saw a big slip in Joe Root's bowling from the first test to the second test just because he's not used to bowling that many overs. He's not particularly accurate. He sprayed the ball around a lot in this first innings. They also don't want to be in a situation where Joe Root has to play as the 3rd spinner when they're desperate for a 3rd spinner, knowing that they've got 2 young or 3 untied spinners to pick from, right? If Jack Leach was playing, I think they might have gone with 2 seamers. We had heard beforehand that they were thinking of going 2 spinners, 2 seamers, and Joe Root as the 5th bowler. But that was thinking that Jack Leach was going to bowl 35 overs a day, every day, maybe even more than that some days, right? They didn't have that in the first test because he got injured. And they probably got bailed out of that a little bit by Joe Root and Hartley's wickets. But in the second test, they weren't going to have Leach at all. So then your most experienced spinner is Joe Root. You can't have him bowling 40 or 50 overs in a test match. Maybe it's not a problem in this test match, and it may be not even a problem in the 3rd test match, but by the 4th and the 5th test match. It's little things with spinners, as we saw with Moeen Ali, it's the calluses on your fingers. He won't have the same kind of calluses that a frontline spinner would have, and by the end of this series, he would really be struggling. I think Muku, I don't know if you found it, but I think there should be a super chat from Soham, if you can find it there. Rupesh says, is Jasper Bumrah the greatest pacer India has ever had? He currently has a better bowling average than any other pace bowler. And I mean pace bowler because Sydney Barnes is kind of more of a spinner, or at least a hybrid, than we've ever seen for 150 wickets, Rupesh. So I think that's pretty safe. I think Kapil Dev was absolutely fantastic. Javagal Srinath did wonderful things in a tough era, especially at home for him. Who else do we have? Shami's a brilliant bowler as well. Zahid Khan. I don't think Zahid Khan's record, lives up to the bowler that I remember. Ishant Sharma, that one of the best comeback stories we've ever seen in cricket history. So yeah, I do think there's been some fantastic bowlers, but how do you compare those to Bumrah, right? Like, he just is absolutely a separate class to every other bowler. When it comes to record, it's worth remembering it's only 150 wickets, but we still talk about Waqar Younis and the back half of his career tailed off, right? And the thing with Jasper Bumrah is, if somehow the back half of his career did tail off, India probably has enough talent that, maybe that's not the case. He's so good, they would keep him around. But he's not going to be one of those bowlers who has a fantastic start and then maybe plays for another 6 or 7 years, because I think he would probably just aim himself at the other stuff where he probably won't tail off, which is white ball cricket. I can't see him ever tailing off in Test cricket either. But if out of the 3 formats, I would say that Test cricket might be the one, because of the stress that he puts on his body. He might struggle to repeat himself at as much as he should be able to in the other ones. But look, is he the best pacer that India's ever had? Yes. I don't think it's particularly close. And Kapil Dev, absolutely fantastic cricketer. Kapil Dev probably still a greater cricketer than Bumrah, just because of what he could do on both sides of the ball, and you also factor in his fielding. But as a test bowler, no, I don't think anyone's picking Kapil Dev over Jasper Bumrah. I can't imagine you ever feeling, because Bumrah can swing the ball, not the way that Kapil Dev did, but he can swing the ball. He's a better seam bowler. He's faster. He hits the deck harder. He's got a weirder action. Like, do you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. When you start to, put all those things together, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Remember, if you want to get in with some chats, we've still got a couple more minutes, so I'll certainly line some more up. I'll do this one from Soham, another super chat that we're just catching up with. But please feel free to put some more comments in and any more super chats, and we'll have a quick break after this one. Soham says, is Jimmy Anderson the Anil Kumble of England? Someone with an unbelievably high number of wickets, yet nowhere near the league of Warne, McGrath, Murali. I think he's probably a better player than Kumble, just because I would have thought Jimmy Anderson's more in the Ashwin mould than Kumble mould. Yeah, it's a weird one, actually. It's a really interesting. I'm trying to go through their records quickly mentally in my head. I see what you mean. I think what you're saying is that there's absolute. You're talking about Warne, McGrath, Murali. You could probably throw Courtney Walsh in there as well, right? Of guys with, averages just far well and above anyone close to them in their skills. So Warne and Murali, their averages are so low for spinners with a huge amount of wickets. And McGrath is there. I can't remember what Courtney Walsh is, but he wouldn't be far away from that one as well. So maybe it's Ashwin, Courtney Walsh, and Anderson on that sort of second tier, and maybe Kumble is on that tier as well. We actually got a project, don't spoil it too much, but when Ashwin takes his 500th wicket, there might be a video that will be coming. We do compare Ashwin and Kumble, and it is, when you look at it contextually, I think they're far more similar than most people would understand. I think people just look at the overall averages and go, well, there's no way that Ashwin can't be 10 times better than Kumble, but it's just not true when you start to factor in the sorts of wickets that both of them bowled on. So maybe that's that tier, and maybe Courtney Walsh is even with that tier. I'm trying to think at the top of my head as well. And Broad is maybe just slightly below that tier as well, with someone like Harbhajan Singh. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, late career Anderson, though, is he's something else, right? Like, he really is. To have a seamer this good in his 30s into 40s. You know, Hadley's the only other bowler that we could think of that is a bit similar to him, that again started really slow and then gets it together. And had Hadley bowled a lot more in the 70s, probably would have had a much more similar career to Anderson, whereas Hadley's record probably looks even better than it should, because in the 70s and New Zealand didn't play as much and they start to play a lot more in the 80s. That's my memory of it anyway. And that's when Hadley starts to get his act together, late 70s, early 80s. But yeah, it's a really good question, Soham. But I think that kind of tier that we said, and what we're combining here is, 400 wickets and above with, those kinds of bowlers that we're looking at. And I think that's probably a fairly fair way of looking at it. Let's have another quick break. And then after the break, we will come back with more Scoreboard. I am Jared Kimber. Remember, I'm here every day. So if you haven't subscribed, what are you doing with your life? I mean, what are you doing with your 10 seconds? Just press the little bell icon or the subscribe button or whatever. They're all down here somewhere. Maybe it's up here. I'm not sure. But keep commenting and give us a like as well. We'll have a quick break and I'll see if there's anything left in the chat. If you've got a super chat, I will definitely get to that as well. Jared Kimber, Scoreboard. Break.
This is just one of our NordVPN know nothing about knuckleballs, but they can help you with online safety. If you need a VPN, use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount and 4 months for free. They also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, which is risk-free. The link is in the show notes. So stop thinking about knuckleballs for 2 minutes and go to nordvpn.com/Kimber and get your deal. Support us on Patreon. Join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer, plus behind-the-scenes stuff. We've built our channel on Patreon support, so a huge thanks to everyone who has helped. In cricket, I don't believe in momentum, but when it comes to my social media videos, I like Memento. Its AI listens to me so that I don't have to, and then it can chuck in GIFs and subtitles and make it all fit all the different kinds of social media sizes. Memento does it all. It slices, it dices, and it resizes all of your hottest takes, your coldest facts, and your weirdest vibes. Grab it today and make your content start smashing the ball all around social media.
All right, Advith says, can you please fix the mismatch in volume between the ads and the show? The problem with this, Advith, is that the ads are very hard to, the ads are pre-recorded. And they're pre-recorded based on me being in my studio. And as you can see, I'm not in my studio. This is a different microphone. It's at a different depth from me. So it's quite hard. It is something that we are working on, but this is not a professional channel, Advith. Right? This is not a TV channel. It's a YouTube channel. Sometimes it's going to sound dodgy. Sometimes we're going to put slides up and Cheyenne isn't going to explain what they are, and I'm going to get confused when reading them. Right? All these things are just part of what this is. We are trying to professionalize. If you haven't seen or haven't had a chance, we're getting to the point. We've got our website now, so goodareas.co, which will eventually have a link to hopefully the majority of our videos, but also podcasts and everything else that you can go over and have a look at. But yeah, this is not like a TV company. It's not even like, I don't know, a production that is made for something else. Like it really is me with a crappy microphone that can fit in my backpack and talking to my laptop, right? Like it is what it is. Banterous Lemon says, do you have a prediction for New Zealand versus South Africa game starting tomorrow? If South Africa bat first, can they make a decent fist of it? Oh. They shouldn't be able to, should they? Look, I looked at the South African team, and Dan Peets is there, so there's some good players as well. But it looked like a side to me where it looked like the sort of side when you're touring a country and you're playing against the A team, but actually there's a round of domestic games being played. So instead of sending the actual A team, you send just random dudes. I remember there was England played one of those in the 13-14 Ashes up at Alice Springs, which was great because I got to go to Alice Springs. But it was a very weird moment having a look at the lineup of some of those players, although shout out Michael Hill. But they actually ended up dominating their game against the English, which was quite funny. But that's what it looks like to me. So I don't know. It depends on what you mean by a decent fist of it. I suppose as long as they don't fist themselves, they'll have a chance there. Harry says, is India a player in captain-centric team? is Australia a coach and management-centric team? How can England and South Africa be categorised? So you've got to understand the way that cricket developed, right? So most of the world developed the same way, which is that it is a captain-led team, right? That's a fairly standard way. That was the way that cricket was played, and there's a reason for this, Harry, and that is that you have a situation where the captains from England were the one percenters, right? They were from rich families, they elite backgrounds. They played as amateurs, despite the fact that they often got paid more than the professionals. It's a complete sham, of course, but that is why captaincy is the way it is in cricket, and that's why the sport has developed the way that it has. Now, that basically bled in, and if you have a look at global cricket, most places are their own version of cricket with a twist, with a local flavour. Now, I don't know why Australia is not like that. And I don't know if it has something to do with sort of Aussie rules football and rugby league, but cricket is played in Australia as more of a team sport. So there is, and this is, I don't, in the history of cricket, it's really quite rare to find what Australia has. And when you play cricket in Australia, you really do get how different it is to playing cricket in other parts of the world. I've played cricket in a few different places in the world, mostly in England and Australia, but I played games in Sri Lanka and South Africa and other places. And in most places, there is more of an element of a hierarchical system, and people play for themselves. And remember, cricket's a weird sport. It is a bunch of solo pursuits in a team sport. But for whatever reason, in Australia, and maybe you could make an argument now that New Zealand and South Africa are a little bit more like this, and certainly baseball is more like this at the moment. There's an element of team sort of coming in. And I think that Australia always had it, and I think that, the whole baggy green concept, if you compare that to, playing for England, there was always a big difference between those two. And I know this, I don't want to say what era this was, but it was within the last 20 or 30 years. So a friend of mine was working with the England team and was saying that when England players watch like rugby players talking about, the badge and bleeding for their teammates and all that sort of stuff, they kind of rolled their eyes. And I think that if you spend a lot of time with county cricketers like I have, it's not that they don't want to play for their county team or their national team or anything like that, but there's something about the English game that is very much a professional working job situation. And there was always something about the Australian cricket for many different reasons. As I said, I think rugby league and rugby union, I suppose, and Aussie rules all played a bit of a part in this. But also, I think if you go back, there was always more of the first Australian tour was a collective, right? So it was like a unionised thing where they all chipped in a certain amount of money. They went over to play cricket in England, and then they all took a share of that. There's always been a bit more of an element of that. Where did the Players' Union come out of? It comes out of Australia. There's a bit, just a different way that it developed for many different reasons. It does feel very much to me. I remember playing a game of cricket in England early on, and I was smashing the ball everywhere. Got to 20 and then did what I always do, played a stupid shot. And me and the other guy, we put on the team was in trouble, and we put on 30 or 40 really, really quickly. And then I went out, and inning kind of fizzled out a little bit. And I said to the guy I went out to, I'm really sorry. Really sorry about that. And he sort of looked at me weirdly. And then he said, why are you apologising to me? It's your wicket. And I realised that in Australia, you would apologise because you and the other guy had formed a partnership, and but I had formed a partnership in my mind, but the other guy was just batting at his end and I was batting at my end. And I've had those sorts of conversations a few times. So I just think there's a different way of looking at it. So I think most countries around the world are their own version of England. But I also think that in this modern coach-driven society, as cricket changes a little bit and things start to develop and move forward, that cricket will become more of maybe something more like basketball, because basketball's although there's more connective tissue in basketball, isn't there? Because you have to have the people move around you. Yeah, I don't know, but I do think that will be. I do think there will be a move back towards teams thinking about it more. If you look at baseball, that sort of sacrificing your openers style of things, and you know, so I do think teams are moving towards that more and more as we go ahead. But maybe T20 cricket will change that again, because T20 cricket, you have to put your best earning years forward, and you're talking about a lot of money now. So maybe we'll get situations where and I already know of these, players getting drafted to T20 teams, and then not refusing to play, but not putting in a full effort because they're being played out of position and everything. So that is still a prevalent thing within cricket. But I do think that sort of team aspect of cricket is, I think it was just the way that it was formed. I don't think it was the different cultures. I think it was more to do with the way that it was formed in those two different major countries. And Australia doesn't really spread cricket. Eventually they help with the globalization of the game, but they don't spread it. It is England who spreads that game, and they spread it in this look where we're playing this game. There's the Visi end, right? That hierarchical structure, and I think Abhishek was telling me that for years, India sent kind of non-playing kind of players on tours to England. So that was built into the Indian system as well. And, we've seen that in Sri Lanka and, the West Indies with having white captains, and it's always been there. So it's a very, very interesting conversation you have, Harry, from this. I suppose the best way of putting it is, why is Australia so different, and what was it that made Australia divert from that? It might be something worth getting, Gideon Haigh onto the podcast at one stage, and because I think, he's even more of an expert on that early Australian period. I know a bit about early Australian period, but it's not a specialty subject of mine. And last one from Somek. I don't think we have any more super chats, but thank you to everyone who did. Why do you think India picked Patidar? There must be many other number 5 options like Sarfaraz. So I think why they picked Patidar was they're looking for a type of player, with Rahane and Pujara not playing, and you could throw Kohli in here as well. But I think it's more about the Rahane and Pujara side of it when they don't have KL Rahul and Kohli. They just wanted a player who knew their game a little bit more, that sort of experienced player who isn't going to be flustered by too many situations, who's going to come in and play his way. Last couple of years, of course, he has averaged, whatever it may be, 60 or 55 plus in first-class cricket after quite a slow start, but he certainly worked out his game after COVID. You're right, Sarfaraz is out there. There's quite a few of those Indian batters with, ridiculous batting averages. But what you're probably looking at is players with incredible skills in certain situations, but maybe not quite as rounded. And I think in Patidar, they were having a look at him in the IPL, have a look at him for India A, knowing the sort of person he is, just the way he bats. I think there is an element of them going, he can come in and be a safe pair of hands. And I think that's going to be frustrating for a lot of Indian players, a lot of Indian supporters, because this reminds me of the sort of Australian era where it's just like, just get the next gun in. Where's the next Jaiswal? Just pick him. Just pick the next Jaiswal. And you keep doing that, but you actually find that, that sort of older player who's a bit more mature is sometimes the one who settles into Test cricket a little bit more. And that experience and the level-headedness. If you looked at the way, when we looked at the game last time, I think we thought India had a chance of chasing, even though it was a tough chase. But when you looked at that batting lineup, you did want kind of just one player who, a little bit more mature down the order, to be out there. So I think there's some parts of that. But I wouldn't have had a problem if they picked Sarfaraz as well. But if you look at what they're doing, and I think Mike Atherton talked about this recently with England, Test teams used to be picked on who the best players were. And now I think Test teams are picked a lot more on what role are we trying to fill and who's the person who can best fill that role. And I think in this particular case, that is what you were seeing with Patidar. Also, you don't want to be in a situation where you only pick the next 22-year-old who's averaging 60 all the time. Not that that's a big issue. Or the 24-year-old who's averaging 70 or whatever it may be. Without realizing that there are a lot of late bloomers who can also give you 3 or 4 years of well above average performance as well. Like, you do want a combination of both, and also very different kinds of players, right? And that's where I think it gets down to. I think that was it. That's the last super chat. Thank you everyone for the super chats as well. But you know, masses of people came here today. Ayush was in here, Bav was in here. Who forgot? Rohit, Gaurav, just absolutely heaps of people leaving. Keshav popped in for a little bit as well. But thank you to everyone for coming on again. If you're new here, a lesson. There's a lesson for us. If you are new here, please subscribe, like, and we are here for every day of this test series. When there is test cricket being played, I will be roughly in front of this background or a different background or at home with the microphone I trust nearer to my lips. But thank you to everyone for their support. And we will, I don't know if we've got a couple of big videos, but just they'll be coming on the main channel in a couple of days. But if you haven't been over to the main channel and this is your first time, head over to the main channel as well. And if not, this is Scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber. I will be back tomorrow for more of exactly this.
Ever wondered why slower deliveries work? What a zombie ball is? Or how Sunil Gavaskar would have batted in T20? Well, we have the channel for you, Good Areas. Twice a week, we have a new deep dive into a great story from cricket on our main channel, Good Areas. It is the history and present of cricket as narrated by me. If you make any content, Memento is the tool for you. Take your long format pods and meetings and anything you have and let Memento cut and slice it up for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Memento.